Hey, what's up, you guys? My name is Mikko Krashovsky, and welcome to episode 67 of That Remote Life podcast, where we hear from location-independent entrepreneurs and professionals so you can quit the cubicle and live life on your terms. Now, today on the podcast, I'm joined by Tom Burden, the CEO and founder of Grypmat, which is a multi-purpose flexible tool mat for mechanics that helps keep your tools in place and organized while you work on cars, planes, or anywhere else that you might need tools. Tom came up with the idea for Grypmat after serving in the Air Force as a jet mechanic. And after leaving the Air Force, he dove into the startup world and launched his company. The Grypmat is now a favorite tool of mechanics and DIYers all over the country, and even caught the eye of Marc Cuban, Lori Grenier, and Richard Branson when Tom appeared on Shark Tank to pitch Grypmat. And during this episode, Tom and I discussed what it was like to start your own business after coming out of the military, and if he thought that his experience in the Air Force was a pro or a con to starting a business, what he learned from his Shark Tank investors, and what appearing on the show was like. And we also got to talk about his experience running an e-commerce business with a partially remote team, and what his ideas and plans are around continuing to work remotely after the COVID pandemic. Now, this was a really fun conversation, and I hope you guys like it as much as I did. As always, you can find the full show notes over at thatremotelife.com/episode 67. That's episode all spelled out, followed by the number 67. All right, you guys, without further ado, let's dive into this interview with Tom Burden. All right. Well, Tom, welcome to the show, man. Thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to be here. We were just saying before we hit record, I showed up looking like this, and you showed up with a bow tie and like suspenders and all dressed up for people who are listening on audio. I'm getting shown up right now, but is that how you always dress for interviews, or am I just like a special case?
This is how I dress like this all the time. Like I sleep in this outfit. I take showers in this outfit. I go jogging in this outfit. I'm just kidding. Just like events or interviews. Yeah. Depends on the interview. If it's like automotive focused, I might have like a Grypmat shirt on, be in front of like a car with a hood popped with Grypmats underneath it. But yeah, I mean, just kind of, if it's more like entrepreneurial based or like motivational based, I'll wear this outfit.
Where'd that come from? Like, were you always were you like a big Bill Nye fan, or what? Like, where did the bow tie come from?
I had this roommate, Jackie, who she had like 6 wigs, and when she would go out, she'd wear a wig, and each wig had a different personality. For my birthday, she was like, "We're all gonna get dressed up and go out for your birthday," and I'm like, "I'm down, but I'm not wearing a wig. I'll make my own outfit." I call it Wilbur. So the original Wilbur was like very like nerdy, like tape on the glasses, like a calculator in my pocket, and like the whole 9 yards. But then Wilbur kind of grew into like just more of like kind of a little bit nerdy, but like less nerdy and more like 007 style almost. more like chic or a little more modern. Yeah.
So was there a point at which Wilbur and Tom kind of became the same person, or do you still feel like you switch between the two?
So now we have Tilbur. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe they just like merged together. I would say that there's definitely like a energy and an attitude of like, if I go out like and there's a dance floor, I like to dance a lot. And there's also like this thing when I wear the outfit, if I'm going to like a public event, they like if there's someone taking tickets or someone like guarding the door, I can almost every single time just walk by them. And they like, if I'm standing in line, they're like, "Why are you standing in line?" They just like think I'm supposed to be there, or like I'm a performer or something. Because it's just like a unique outfit, I guess.
I think there's definitely some truth to that. And to people listening, we're not just going to talk about bow ties and stuff like that. We'll dive into some business stuff, but I definitely think there's some truth to the thing of like dress for the job you want kind of thing. I definitely think there's some truth to that because when I worked in menswear in a past life, like there's definitely that like the clothes in a way are like you can't like that has happened to me before as well where like if I dress really sharp on a day-to-day basis you do have that thing where like oh you just assume that you should be there and that kind of thing, so I can
Yeah.
definitely see that. But I again, Tom, thank you for being on this podcast. And for people who don't know you, you're the founder of Grypmat, which is a really cool company. What exactly is Grypmat? If you kind of, I know that you've probably practiced your elevator pitch 18 gazillion times, but I'll give you another chance to practice it.
Yeah, so it's a flexible non-slip tool tray that gives mechanics a safe place to set their tools. So I was an F-16 mechanic, was tiring my tools sliding off the aircraft. And later in my mom's car, I noticed she had a non-slip mat on her dashboard to keep her cell phone in place when driving. So I was like, well, we can make these larger for tools. And it's also like bright orange. So it acts as like a visual management to give, it's a visual management so you can easily see your tools. So um, it's kind of like building the habit for mechanics to constantly set their tools into the tool tray. So like on top of an aircraft, the issue is like tools sliding, not a really good place to set tools. So it's grippy, holds the tools. Underneath the hood of a car, it's the problem is that people are scattering their tools all over the engine and they're not staying organized, not keeping their tools together. Therefore, when they get in a hurry, it's easy to, drop the hood of the car, start working on the next car for, the professional mechanics, and they could easily like leave their tools underneath the hood. So the mechanics are known for leaving tools underneath the hood, and they can be like very costly. The high end professional mechanic tools can cost a lot of money. Like a single ratchet could cost $165. Talking to mechanics, it's very common for them to say, "Yeah, I've lost that $165 ratchet, or I've lost a flashlight, or anything." Something that's interesting with the flashlights is that they're magnetic, and then they'll like stick to the hood, and then like over time the flashlight will die, and then they'll just keep working and then forget about it, and then they drop the hood, and yeah.
Shit breaks.
So shit breaks and shit gets left in cars and planes and all kinds of other things.
So one of the interesting things to me is that with your military background, I view entrepreneurs as being very creative, right? And I think that that sometimes pushes against the sort of personality that you see from a lot of like people that are in the military. Was that something that like were you always entrepreneurial in that way and you were in like that was something that you almost had to like battle with in the military, or do you feel like it was the opposite? Like what do you think about that?
So there's been a like growing up, my parents were kind of like they showed me the basics of entrepreneurship. Like my dad does snow removal and construction on the side full time. He's a truck driver. So like I understood like how you could approach people or like just kind of start your own thing. And then my mom, she's an extreme couponer and would sell everything on the garage sale. So like she kind of showed me like the basics of sales and how to take money, how to like count money, how to the concept of like you know you had $20 in sales at your hot dog stand, but $10 of that was change that mom gave you, and then $5 of that was to pay for the plates and the hot dogs and everything. So as a little kid, I'm like, dude, we've got $20. And I see now, it's funny, like seeing other companies or people would be like, our revenue was like 100 grand. I'm like, yeah, but your profit is the only thing that really matters. And that was only like 10 grand. So you really didn't make any money when you factor in like time and labor. So it is like, I did have like the very basics. And then like when you're saying going to the military, it's kind of interesting because the military like really, really pushes you to be like a rule follower and like really like stay within the parameters. And with entrepreneurship, it's not always like that.
Was that something that you had to deal with afterwards? Is because like exactly like a lot of entrepreneurs are rule breakers, right? So is that something that you almost had to relearn, or do you feel like there's something about following the rules in that way? that was beneficial to you?
I think growing up, the concept of following the rules was not a focus. So if anything, I probably had more trouble of like going to the military and then having it switch to being a focus. When you're growing up and you've questioned the rules, you think how to question them more in depth than someone who's like never questioned them before. So um, for example, I remember someone saying, "Well, you can't set anything on the jet when you're working on it," which would be the grip mat. Set the grip mat on the jet. And I was like, "Where do you see that? Like, tell me where you found that rule." And then they're like, it was kind of one of those things that we think it's a rule. It's not really a rule. We're not sure, but we could probably maybe find something close to that if we really looked. And then also, I'm like, I knew that person wasn't an authority to tell me no. So like someone who's like really, really like following the rules. I noticed that with rules is that there's like different levels of people who with like rules. There's someone who's like, I'm going to break the rules because I find it fun just breaking rules. There's people who are like, if I don't see the rule, then it's not a rule. It could be like trespassing. I didn't see a trespassing sign, so it's no big deal when you're like clearly in someone's yard, where it's like you are trespassing. And then I've seen like people who will almost like fabricate rules where you're like doing something, and they're like, wait, I think this is break. I don't think we're supposed to do this. And I'm like, where did this? They'll just like create rules where, yeah. So I feel like the military is almost like has encouraged people to like create rules. So, where I was like the complete opposite. So yeah, I guess I never got beaten into submission of like being the person who creates rules. I guess what it really helped me with is to be ready to identify objections and like be ready for the person who's going to have, kind of like foresee like here's some rules that might come about, and then basically brainstorm or think about when that happens, how do I handle those objections if they are real rules? Does that make
When
sense?
I Yeah, and I also think that like a lot of times the biggest strength can lie in not being like overly on one side, right? So if you were naturally a rule breaker going into an environment like the military where you're kind of like forced to follow rules might push you a bit more into the middle where you can, kind of like benefit from both sides. Like, would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I remember one time in particularly. So when we got to basic training, they took all of our cell phones and like locked them in this closet. And so you're in what's called a flight in the Air Force. A flight is like 65 people, guys. And so we're like flight number 690. Uh, so 690. So our brother flight, so another flight that we would like do like trainings a lot with was flight 689. So they're like one number below, they were like one number before us. And I remember flight 689, they had some guys basically remove the ceiling tiles to climb above it and go into the closet. So like I know that like they were like looking for those rules to break, and I'm like, I don't know if it's an exact rule, but that's almost like too far. Like I can almost guarantee that is not supposed to happen. And also, yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying of like being a little more balanced. I was almost like weighing out like is it worth breaking this rule? Also like getting fully understanding of what is the repercussions of breaking a rule. Like there's rules all the time. If you do something, like here's the max consequence is if you were to go in front of a judge, you could, they'll say like $500 fine, 30 60 days in jail. That is like the absolute worst case scenario, but the thing is you have every single scenario before that. So if it was something like, I would never do this, but if you're like parking in a handicap parking spot, now you're probably, it'll say like $250 to $500 fine. which the thing is, if you're parked in there and you're sitting in the car, you most likely won't, the cop won't come up and say, hey, give me 500 bucks. The cop might knock on your door and be like, hey, what are you doing? If the cop comes. So I guess what I'm trying to say is with the rule following, I've kind of like gauged where, like, if let's say if I were to trespass, I'm probably not going to get arrested and put in jail overnight.
Right. Is the risk worth the benefit, sort of?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I'd say, is the risk worth the benefit? And then, like, how practical is the maximum risk? And are you,
Hmm.
looking at the maximum risk? So that kind of translates with business because people will be like, well, I'm afraid to do a business because, I might end up homeless or I might lose my house or not be able to pay my bills. We're like, that's not really like in their mind, they're going to like the most severe case where, like, I talked to a lot of homeless people and not one of them said, yeah, I'm homeless because I just like swung for the fences for my dream and I'm just like on the streets now. It's usually like a drug problem or like a psychological problem. So yeah, I think it is like almost a healthy reminder of like bringing the risk of breaking a rule or risk of having a business, like bringing it down to reality and be like, okay, what is the real risk, and am I able to overcome those those barriers, or do I not even like want to put up with it because it's not worth the reward?
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, like you've mentioned, like having worked as a mechanic in the Air Force, something I'm curious about is, like, obviously you've spent a lot of time working on complex machines that are airplanes and jet fighters and stuff like that. Having worked on such complex machines, what are some of the similarities that you see from working on jets to running a business? As they are sort of similar in that, like a jet, a business, a well run business tends to be a complex system. What are some of the things that you've learned from working on jets and airplanes that you feel like have translated into business that the rest of us that haven't worked on airplanes can learn from?
Definitely like a general understanding of tools. And so, like, the tools that are used to work on a car, to work on your sink, to work on a fighter jet, there's some that are different, but there's a lot that are very much so the same. So what's kind of cool is, like, in the mechanic world, someone who works on cars finds it really cool of someone who works on a fighter jet machine gun, which, like, honestly, that car mechanic could probably be briefed in like a couple hours on how to work on the machine gun. It's just there is like this concept of like, oh, your thing is cooler, so therefore there's kind of like this awe factor. That's something I see that's like translatable of just like the general knowledge of tools. I think it is kind of interesting of seeing the Air Force's structure of how they're operating to like task delegate and how they're um, really doing a systematic approach. So I do like admire within the Air Force of like how they do a systematic approach and how they do have like a chain of command and their system of like going up the chain of command and down the chain of command. So that's been pretty cool to see, and honestly something I need to like reflect on more. So the big difference between like the military and the startup world is like the military does this stuff all day every day for decades, where startup world is, we could switch everything within, a few weeks, a few months. So I mean, like, when COVID hits, everything switched overnight. So startup world pivots and everything has to be recreated, where military is very systematic, and is definitely slower at shifting. um, but I do like how they can be systematic. The systematic can be like when you find a repeatable process, the Air Force is like really good at expanding on that.
So, I mean, I think that looking at the startup world, that's one of its benefits, right? Versus like some of the larger corporations, is that, like you said, a startup, when COVID happened, is much quicker to pivot, and thus, like, it's much more likely they'll survive versus a big corporate entity, right? I think that's one of its strengths. But at the same time, one of the big strengths of the military is exactly how systematic they are. So, do you think that it's more like the startup world needs to learn from the military, or do you think that the military perhaps needs to learn a little bit of that, like pivoting from the startup world?
There's a massive need for the military to learn from the startup world for sure. There's actually a group that I like to work with. Is called AFWorks, and they're really the forefront of making that shift happen. So
Mm,
it's been really cool to see. They're pretty young program, but I mean they're making like a lot of waves, and they're really cool. A lot of amazing people in that program.
gotcha. Obviously, like one of I think the really exciting things that's happened for you with Grypmat, and I've gotten to watch it a little bit because my friend Ian works with you. So, I've kind of gotten to see the whole journey of Grypmat. One of the really exciting things that's happened for you guys is that you appeared on kind of on Shark Tank and you scored a pretty big deal from that. So, congratulations on that. I don't think I've gotten to say that personally. I think that for so many people that are in the startup space, their goal is like, oh man, someday I just want to be on Shark Tank. And that's such an amazing achievement. Was that you? And then if it was when you did get to Shark Tank, did you wake up the next day sort of like, all right, now what?
So I was kind of like, well, now what? And like, well, I guess we'll do an update. And then we did an update, and it's like, now what?
Right.
And we did another update, and then I was like, okay, we can't just be doing this all the time. And yeah, it was actually pretty redefining for myself and redefining for the company. Really focused. I mean, the focus was completely different of just like, how do you apply? Okay, we got a deal. How do we, get, do the deal with the sharks? Um, so then it was, we're not really focused on that. We're focused on, what's our messaging as a company? What's our mission as a company? So what's our like relationship with our customers as a company? So it's been pretty cool to like transition to that and grow into like a real company, not just be like this wishful person in a basement wanting to be on a TV show.
Yeah, I think that relates to a lot of people who like, I mean, there's so many of these like entrepreneurial personalities now that are like famous. And I think a lot of people like really like their goal is to like meet those personalities and then like you meet them and you're almost like you said like you meet them and you're like okay like now what, like I met them, I found out that they're not Superman, they're actually just like a normal human being, and then like it's almost like you need to like almost redefine like what do you do now, like what is the like next big hill that you want to get to.
Yeah, there's been a few times I've met some like um, higher level people, and sometimes I'm like, you got this far, like operating that way. And at first, it was like kind of discouraging, but it was kind of motivating after because I'm like, if you can get this far and you're on that level, I'll be fine.
Right,
you
right,
know,
right.
with if I can, you can get this far with half a brain, I should be able to get, pretty far with, you know, dodging the potholes that you jumped in. So yeah, it is pretty. It can be pretty exciting if you depending on how you want to look at it.
As a Shark Tank fan myself, I'm not a like the biggest fanboy, but I am a fan. I do watch the show. I'm curious because I've noticed that there is a little bit of a camaraderie in between the companies that have been funded by the same shark. So I'm curious what company that is kind of like another company that has been funded by one of the three sharks that you work with. Which company have you kind of learned the most from, and what was that lesson?
So another Shark Tank company or another Shark Tank company that has the same investor.
Um, I guess either. I didn't know if you had more connection to ones that weren't even invested by the same shark.
So one thing that we do have is called I won't say the name of it, but we've got a private Facebook group of Shark Tank, um, of anyone who's been on the show. So you had to
Mm,
like be on stage and have it air for you to be in this group.
Even if you get a deal or not?
Deal or not. So you could get so in real life, some people can get a deal and it won't air. So that person is not allowed in this group. Has to has to air, and you have to be on stage. So you can't be like, oh, I'm the COO of this company, but I wasn't on the TV show. Like you're not in that group. So um, in that group, there is a lot of like, I host a mastermind. Actually, Eugenia mostly hosts the mastermind. We were like tag teaming, and then I like started it, and then I was like, Eugenia, I'm way over my head. I can't, like, I need help with this. And then Eugenia like actually made it a
And
thing.
who's Eugenia?
So Eugenia, yeah, Pataloon, I think is Pataloon, where it's basically a dog, and it's an outfit where like on the front of the dog, and it makes it look like the dog has hands. I'm not sure if you've seen it.
Oh,
It's like
that's
the
her business. Okay.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Oh, I know what you're
so
talking about. Yep.
yeah, it's like the cutest outfit you could ever get for a dog. But in that group, we've been like getting more closer knit. There's definitely like a lot of familiar faces that you see with like within the Marc Cuban companies or Lori Grenier companies, especially like the Lori G companies will be. A lot of them go to like the Ace Hardware show, or they'll go to the Home and Houseware show in Chicago every year. So it's cool. Like Lori will have her own aisle of companies, so there's a lot of like collaboration, a lot of a lot of excitement to see your friends again. It's kind of interesting of seeing. So we were part of a Shark Tank update with like a collection of Lori Grenier companies, and it's kind of cool to like see the OG Shark Tankers, and then there's like the new Shark Tankers. It's almost like the little kids table and like the adults table sometimes. Like the Lori G OG companies would be like Scrub Daddy or Squatty Potty, or those are probably like the two biggest for sure.
And those are like the big boys at the table. You're like, oh man, season one, season two. Like,
Or like Bambooey, or what is it, the Drop Stop. It's funny because like they've known each other. They were all like season 3 or 4. That was like kind of like the like Shark Tank was like really growing fast. um they've just been around each other for basically like 6 or 7 years, where we've been around for like 2 or 3. So it's kind of like interesting seeing, um, I don't know, just seeing how well they connect to each other. Like, quick story, I probably shouldn't tell this, but I'm telling it anyway. The Scrub
we get
Daddy
the
guy,
exclusive.
yeah, the Scrub Daddy guy, he at his booths, like the Scrub Daddy guy, the Scrub Daddy Daddy, his name's Aaron. He is an amazing salesperson. Like his pitch is fantastic, and at has a very good demos, very good setup at his booth. And I guess somehow his iPads got stolen, and they were like, he was able to like track the iPads, and they were seeing that they were like going to like the hardcore like hood in Chicago, and the drop stop guys were like trying to like prevent him from like going to go find these guys. And he's like, I don't know if there was alcohol involved or not. Wouldn't surprise me with this crew. They like to play hard, and they like to work hard. And they like to play hard. But anyway, the drop stop guys just talk about how he was like, he's like, I'm gonna find these people. Like, it was really like mad that someone just stole something from him. And and they're like, dude, you're a millionaire. You don't have like, just buy another iPad. Fuck it, I'll buy another iPad for you. Like, and they end up having like call Lori at 3 in the morning to be like, hey, can you just like talk to Aaron, because he's about to like, he's like about to leave the bar and like go. It's 3 in the morning. He's about to go in like the hood of Chicago to get 2 iPads back. So it's just kind of cool to like see those stories that they have. And kind of talk about like the old school Shark Tank stuff.
And are there any like in, hanging out with those guys, like have you learned like any like lessons from business from them, or has it been more like the camaraderie of being together that's been really helpful?
Yeah, I would say like probably where I've gained the most knowledge is from doing that mastermind. There's like a lot of the younger, like newer Shark Tank companies in there, but it is cool just to be like, hey, I've got we're starting to do YouTube ads. Anyone else doing YouTube ads? Or it could be anything. And sometimes it's been growing. It's like it is always like very valuable, but there is a lot of like just catching up, being excited for other companies. Or there was like three of us in the mastermind group were on Good Morning America together, so it was kind of cool to be like, hey Zach, what are your numbers? Hey, Brandon, like, what kind of deals are you doing? Or different things like that.
I'm curious also, like we haven't like necessarily said this, but you did a very good job on Shark Tank because you got a deal from Marc Cuban, Lori Grenier, and also who am I saying? Richard Branson, right?
Yeah.
And in having worked with all three of those very impressive entrepreneurs, what, if anything, have you learned from watching the way that they operate their business that you've been able to then bring into the way that you operate Grypmat?
Yeah, I would say like Branson has a very like unique leadership style, and it's almost like he's what he's good at is letting other people's brains handle most of the bandwidth. So like as a leader, he's not like making all the decisions. He's just like, "What do you think?" And then you're like, "Well," and then he's just like for after that, he's just like making sure you're going in the like a similar direction that he had in mind, or whatever the direction you want to go is aligned with the direction that he would like. Lori's been like she's like, you know has such a significant inside knowledge about, you know like female shoppers and how they operate, has been like really beneficial for like when we're making ads and doing things for gift buyers. I feel like Mark's been really good with finding like the way his brain works is very like very very big picture, and also like good at finding unique relationships. So it'll be like, oh yeah, I guess that would be a good value there. Or if I'm building out a new type of sales system that is very unique for like startup companies, is there like a program that you could create and sell to Salesforce? And I was like, oh, I've never really thought of like having an asset that we could create to sell to a software company as us being a hardware company.
Yeah, obviously an interesting thing about your company is that while you're not 100% remote, you are, remote friendly. Like I said, my friend Ian works with you guys and, he's obviously remote. Right now you're in Hawaii, which I think is both interesting by the fact that you were just kind of like, hey, COVID's happening. If I'm going to be locked down anywhere, why not Hawaii? That's
Yeah.
interesting. But I'm curious, like, what were some of the things that you learned, operating in a remote friendly way that you're really glad that you learned now that COVID is happening?
Yeah, so you're right. We were like remote friendly. Ian works remote. Everyone else was in the office, and I was always like, I want to travel more. I want to. It would be cool if we had remote workers, or the ability to go remote. But then I guess I put a lot of value in like working together side by side, and I do agree that there is value there. I also put like barriers around working remote and like communication. That so basically working remote is that the barriers around the communication is lower, and the like camaraderie of like working side by side, I'm realizing like it's not as high as I thought. Like us working remote and like doing a Zoom call, most of it can happen through that. I mean, yeah, there is a little bit of like magic sauce that would happen, um, or that there's some magic sauce that would happen if we were working together. But also at the same time, the thing is, when you're working together versus not working together, when you're not working to get together, it's not like, oh, we're not working together, turn off my brain. Like Zoom call, the second we're off the Zoom call, I'm going to turn off my brain. Like we've got dry erase markers and we're writing all over the windows. And sometimes I'll have a thought and I'll be like, oh, I need to send that to Anna, send that to Trent, send that to whoever. So that creativity can, like, the concept of brainstorming or any of that like magic sauce of being together, it can happen separately too. So and I've been like thankful for COVID of just finally, I feel like I was like that kid who like never moved out of his parents' house, and then his parents just like kicked him out of the door, like, you got it, like you're 25, it's time to go. So, and then after, like, at first it's like scary, like, oh dang, and then you get out, and then you're like, oh, actually this is way better, you know. So
Yeah, and I think like with what you said about that there's a magic sauce in being together. I fully agree with that. And I think that that's why some of the companies that are of considerable size, like my friends over at Empire Flippers, for example, which is a huge company, 100 plus people, I think they have now. What they do and what I think is really beneficial is they all work remotely from wherever they want to, but they make sure that on a consistent basis, they all get together and they find that togetherness, even if it's for a couple of days or a week, and the magic sauce that happens there can carry over for the rest of the time they're all over the world, and that can continue until they kind of like get together again. So I think that that's what I push people to do all the time as well.
when they get together, is it like 1 week out of the year, or what's the frequency and what's the duration?
I'm not sure exactly what their frequency is. I think that they might do more than once a year, but they can obviously also do it because they're a bigger company with like bigger margins. I think like even doing it just one time a year. I mean, obviously, if you can do it twice a year or every quarter, like awesome. Like, more power to you and like do it in cool places all the time. Like that'd be really dope. But I think even if it's just 1 year or once a year, it can be really beneficial.
Yeah, yeah, we've talked about that too. Of if we were to like go somewhere to brainstorm for a week or so as a team, if it's like a scenic spot in Salt Lake City, or wherever, I think it would be a lot of fun.
So now that, you've kind of been forced into working remotely due to COVID, is this something that you're going to adopt going forward, or are you sort of looking forward to getting everybody back in Columbus and kind of working together?
I'm pretty solid. We'll be working remote like full time. There'll definitely be like some adjustments of, like, we have things in the office. What do we do with the office? How do we? And then, yeah, because I've been looking to like travel more. So, um, like longer term travel, not just I'm here in town for a trade show. If that would be like moving to, um, LA or Boulder, or those are kind of like the two hot spots to look at now. So,
Why
yeah.
those places? Just personally, you like them, or there's something about them in terms of like what they offer as a location and how it can help you grow?
So, a buddy here who, is with us here in Hawaii. He lives in Boulder and has been talking like very highly of it. Said I could stay with him for a month or so, could help me find a place. Says if there's a lot of like similar or like-minded people there. There's a lot of rock stars in Boulder. I mean, there's a lot of Olympians training there. There's a lot of, I think they say they got the highest per capita of PhDs there. And then LA, I've got like another friend there. Like one of my best friends, she has, originally she was like, I'm going to get a 2 bedroom apartment and have one room as an office. And then she's like, okay, this is kind of dumb. I'm spending a bunch of money on a 2 bedroom. So she's like, yeah, you could come stay with me. So I don't know, maybe I'll like hop around a little bit. I'm not really set on a location. I mean, I really like Austin, Texas. It's another cool spot, or San Antonio's dope. I do like Salt Lake City, but maybe it'll be a month or so at a time until I test it out and like it. Or I wanted to check out DC a bit. I mean, it's pricey, but my friend got a place that's like a mile from the White House, so it'd be kind of cool to like go on a run there. And you know, before it was kind of like an either or of like either you travel or you work on Grypmat. Um, Now it can be a both and. You can do both of them, and you can have a successful business. And so we've got a lot of entrepreneurs here and a very strong entrepreneur vibe, and we're just kind of like talking if we could, after COVID, like keep this going, of have like maybe it's in like South America, or we find a location where we can get a really nice house and everyone's paying like $1,000 a month for the house and food, and be able to sustain it. Because so we've got 5 people in the house now, and it's everyone's getting along really well, and there's been a lot of like synergy. So I've been wanting to like focus, if we were to do that, focus more on like South America, just because like the time zone similarity would be like really nice. But yeah, that's kind of what we brainstorm for fun here.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because my friend Dan from the Tropical MBA, which is a great podcast if anybody is listening and hasn't checked them out before, but back in, I want to say, I don't know, it was maybe like 2015, something like that part of the, like that region of years. What they did was they went to Bali and they rented a house for, I think they said it was, they had just started making money from their company. And he was like, let's spend 17 grand on getting a dope ass villa in Bali. And what they did was they ended up getting this dope villa and then opened the doors to it and said, like, anybody who's like an entrepreneur, like, come stay with us. And they still talk about like the businesses that started in that villa and like all that kind of stuff. So that immediately makes me think of that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Is what's the time difference with Bali?
Shitty as hell.
Really? It's pretty. It's in like it's in Indonesia, right?
Yeah, I think it's like 13 hours.
Yeah, that's a rough one. But yeah, I mean, like I had a buddy talking to me about Peru, and I'm like, well, Peru's basically the East Coast time, which would be really easy. I'm like, as long as you got good Wi-Fi, I'm sure we can find everything else that we need.
I'll tell you the place that you should actually look at is Merida, Mexico, because it's the safest city in Mexico. It used to be one of the richest places in Mexico, and they got like a great business community because of how much money is going to the city, because of how safe it is, great tourism, all that kind of stuff. And it's an Eastern time zone,
Hmm.
and they have like a really good expat community, so it's a good spot.
Is it like coastal?
It's in the Yucatan. It doesn't have a beach, but you drive 45 minutes and you're at a beach town, or I think it's like 2 hours to like Playa del Carmen and stuff like that.
Okay. What's the cost of living? Is it lower or is it pretty good? Okay. That's the ones that we're looking for. Like if we, get a cheap place to stay, as long as you got good Wi-Fi, we're golden.
Yeah, no, it's very cheap, and I think you'd love it. It's a good spot. We spent 3 months there, and we were planning on going back without this COVID stuff happening. So, but sort of in wrapping up, I want to be respectful of your time, and I'm kind of curious, having gone through the military and then all the success that you've had with Gripmat and Shark Tank, and obviously like that. What do all your buddies from the military think about the journey that you've taken, and kind of like what you've done afterwards?
So there's a little bit of I don't want to say misunderstand, but like a difference. I was definitely kind of like a unique person, just because I don't like take to peer pressure very well. And I was also like put in situations where like I couldn't I couldn't take to peer pressure. So like drinking, like having good time, like partying is a very like strong part of our culture, of like the Air Force culture. And I was just always like way too broke to like pay for alcohol, or go out. So like it's drill weekend, National Guard, and you haven't seen your buddies in a month, and you're all coming together. You want to like go out and like have a good time, and go out to eat, relax with your buddies. And to me, I was like, I mean, I had friends there, but I just wasn't like, I wouldn't go out like normal, because I couldn't afford it. So there was always kind of like, there was that, and then kind of like the whole like rule thing was happening. So there was a period where I like moved to Milwaukee for a military business accelerator, and it was like, I was like, can I miss these drill weekends? And it was like, technically, and I had to do all this like paperwork. So it was very like, like, oh my gosh, are you like letting him do that? That's like very taboo. So I was kind of like testing out all the like taboo areas of the military, and then also not doing the norm of the military. So there was like a little bit of like curiosity of like how like of me, and they didn't like really get it. I mean, if I did go out, I'd be like wearing something like this, a bow tie and suspenders. So it's just like, what is this guy's deal? And then things started to progress, and then they're like, oh, I remember, I think it started to like really click when I did a Kickstarter. And they're like, because it was very like visual and transparent of like success, where like if I go to a trade show, I might make a Facebook post of like, had a good show, and then like they might see it. But an ongoing Kickstarter of 3 months, and like the second someone says, holy crap, he just made 100 grand, like that is like an ear grabber, So at that point, it was just kind of like, oh, let's see how far this goes. And it is kind of interesting now of like, I was talking to one guy I was actually like a lot like closer with out of everyone in the military. And I was like talking about some opportunities that he could help out with Grypmat. And there was this conversation we had about like, I was like, how big do you think the Grypmat team is? And he's like, with everything you guys are doing, I'd probably guess like 40. And I'm like, no, we're like 4 at the time. And so there's like a little bit of like perception, and also like just the way military guys like talk is, I think there's almost like exaggerated rumors. I don't think any of them are bad. It's just like this one time, it was like this girl I went to college. It was her brother who's in the Navy, and his Navy base is close to our Air Force base. And sometimes they'll come to our base for like different medical checkups or whatever, or certifications. And he was like, I ran into him in Toledo, Ohio at a bar, and he goes, hey, is it true that you bought the new Tesla Roadster? And I was like, what?
But this is
And
after like Grypmat kind of like made it a little bit bigger.
yeah. And I was just like, what do you mean? He goes, don't lie to me, dude. I know you got one. Like someone said they saw it on your Instagram, and I go, all I'm gonna say is those cars are super fast. and then he goes, okay, I just need to get this one out too. Is it true that you told Walmart to F off? Like you guys are gonna launch with Walmart, and you're gonna do it? And I go, you know what, man? I don't know what you're hearing, but we will not be in Walmart anytime soon. And like
Nice.
that never happened, but it never happened of like me meeting with Walmart. I mean, there wasn't even like, there's sometimes you'll meet someone from Walmart, they're like, maybe this would be a good idea, maybe we could try it out. And then when you're at trade shows and everything, but like I'm like, I don't know where this is coming from. But yeah, there is like definitely this like interesting perspective and perception. There was a couple, some people that were like really big on like the rules, that were like, oh, I never thought this would actually work. Or there's some people who are just like, there's like one guy in particular I can think of, who's very like, he still would be negative about the Grypmat. One guy, he's the very like, he teases hard. Like his humor is like very, very rough. And he would be like, "Don't tell anyone this. Don't tell anyone this, but I actually use your grip mat a lot on my motorcycle. It's like he's like I have actually have all your sizes, and I've like for all my motorcycle buddies, I gift them. It's like the best gift. And whenever we're like broke down alongside the road, like I always carry one with me at all times. This is great. I love it.
Well,
He's
isn't
like,
that the
do not.
best testimonial right there?
Yeah, yeah. He's like, don't tell anyone that I said that.
It's
I was
funny.
like, thanks. uh,
Well,
so,
well, Tom, man, I gotta say, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you sharing all the stories and giving us kind of like a behind the scenes look and everything that you've experienced. Obviously, it's an entrepreneurial journey that a lot of people dream of that they haven't had the chance to experience. So thank you for giving us a look at that. Tell people, like where can they find the Grypmat? I know that you guys have a website, obviously, but are you selling it anywhere else? Like, where can people connect with you?
yeah, so you can find us on our website. It's www.grypmat.com. You can find us on Instagram, on Facebook. My personal accounts are Tom at 26burden. So Instagram, if you want to see me dancing, that's on TikTok. So yeah, feel free to send me a friend request on Facebook, or yeah, feel free to check out our website. So
And I know that you had mentioned that for listeners of the show, we have a little discount for 10% off, I believe. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yes. So if you just do FB10, that'll get you 10% off. So yeah, if you're interested in Grypmat, now's the time to buy it.
There you go. Well, Tom, thanks so much seriously for coming by. I really appreciate it. I hope you had fun, and don't enjoy Hawaii too much for those of us stuck in middle America at the
Yeah,
moment.
it's rough. There's like it's the sun's out. Sometimes it rains. It's like I won't go into how rough it is here.
Thanks. I will zip up my Patagonia a little bit higher since it got chilly here. But thank you so much, seriously, man, and all the best.